And I think sometimes when we're having these conversations, and we do this at conferences too, right? We all agree we're so bad at comms. And I don't want it to be where the industry or the communicators or the general managers feel like we're beating up on them. I just want to get the point across that, like, hey, there is strategy and skill behind this. And so it is something we can improve on and we can learn, right? But we need to be going to trainings and practice and professional development to get better at this stuff. And there's strategy out there that we can learn to do better at it.
Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we dive into the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of water. I'm your host, Isaac Pellerin, and alongside my co-host, Megan Glover, the founder of 120 Water, we bring you insights from hundreds of incredible conversations we've had over the past 9 years with inspiring and energizing leaders in the water industry. Each week, we share those stories and conversations with entrepreneurs, community champions, and innovators who are making water work for everyone. Whether you're a water professional, a curious innovator, or simply passionate about our most precious resource, this podcast is for you. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Make Water Work podcast. I'm so excited about today's guest, Chelsea Boozer. She's just incredible.
She is.
Yeah.
She is a change maker herself. And I think what Rogue Water is doing in the industry to kind of bridge that gap for the masses when it comes to communications and how to practically, launch those communications. I'm excited for this one, Isaac.
I am too. What I've always noticed is just how not only supportive she leads, gives great presentations, but also at every conference, I see her at the sessions cheering those on who are stepping into this role and putting into practice what they're getting from Rogue and from Catalyst and from all the things that she's putting out there. And I'm so excited for this week's conversation. So let's go and take a listen.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today on Make Water Work podcast, where Isaac and I talk to water leaders, innovators, and change makers and bring their stories to you. So let's go make water work today.
Let's do it.
We are so excited to have today's guest, Chelsea Boozer, to the mic and to the pod. And so welcome, Chelsea.
Hey, Megan. Hey, Isaac. Is super excited to have this conversation and be on this new platform with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so excited to have so many of these conversations with folks in the industry. You were one of the first folks that popped into our head in terms of folks who make water work. And the question we ask everyone who comes on the podcast is, how did water find you?
Yeah, I always tell people I don't maybe have the most poetic story that some people have with this. And really what it was, I was in journalism and I had a son 8 years ago, and I said I needed a big girl job with more benefits and better hours than what I was doing in journalism, even though I loved it. And so through relationships in my community, is how I stumbled upon the local regional water utility, needed some comms work and some media relations work. And I said, hey, I could do that, and had the conversations and got on board. But it really wasn't until I got into the organization and they took me on, the Citizens Water Academy type thing where they take you from the lake and through the whole process, that I really understood water and got really excited about it and started being what we call a water nerd. So at first it was just because wanting a better job, and then really I fell in love with it and its purpose and saw the similarities in what I was passionate about before and how water really serves the community.
Yeah. So let's pull on that a little bit from your journey. So from journalist to working for utility and now a leader of, Rogue Water, how have all of those experiences thread together, and what have you carried forward through all of those now kind of as a leader in water, Chelsea?
Yeah, it's funny because I had this conversation recently with someone because an event Rogue puts on called Catalyst, which I'm sure we'll get into and talk about. We're focusing on media relations this year. And I told them when I was a journalist, it was about public service. To me, that's what I was doing. And I know a lot of people don't see journalism that way because public service is like working for government. But, a lot of journalists see us as like the fourth estate and holding government accountable. And I certainly was so passionate about the job because I went in every day to better serve my community and tell them what was going on and how things were affecting them. Then I got into water and at the utility and did media and then communications, ended up doing government affairs and regionalism. And it was the same thing. Every day I came, tried to solve problems and collaborate with groups to better service the communities we were serving. And in that case, a bigger community than perhaps some of my journalism stories. And now Rogue Water just does that on an amplified level. So instead of just my communities here in Arkansas, we try to do it throughout the United States and really equip and inspire and empower utilities and the whole water sector on how do we better engage and build thriving communities with resilient utilities through, more equitable service. And we do that through better engagement. So for me, the thread, I'm doing similar work in each role and just kind of building on it, but public service is the thread.
Yeah, it's so incredible to see what Rogue Water Lab and Catalyst has really grown into and the community that's been created. Can you tell us a little bit more about the gap that it's filling in the
Mhm.
industry?
Yeah. So I think we don't have enough in this water industry really focusing on the skills of how to better engage and build trust. Now, every conference we go and we say we're really bad at communicating, we really need to build trust, and that's one of the major issues. But yet, we're, an industry of engineers and technical experts who are so smart at what they do and so important to this work, clearly. And they know how to do that well, and they know how to build plants, and they know how to give, tech solutions. And that's what we're out there doing. But we have to understand that communications, engagement, that all is strategy and research based too. And there are also experts who do that. And so Rogue is trying to fill that gap in teaching us how to better do that. But what I really like to say, and I've said it before, is that we equip, inspire, and empower. So the equip piece, obviously, the trainings, the webinars, the in person, but really, you have to inspire people to be better. And when you talk about storytelling and messaging, that's all emotion. And then we have to inspire our public to trust this work more and believe in this work. And we have a lot of responsibility as a sector in that. And the empower piece, I honestly find particularly hard because I people come to Catalyst, which is our 3-day kind of summit, where we kind of put all this together, and they are so inspired, and we equip them how to go back and do this better, and they're excited about how they're going to take it back, and then they get deflated when they go back because the decision makers don't believe in this work or they don't have the resources to do it in the best way. So really, we want to empower the sector to be able to do some of this work better. So Catalyst is where we do a lot of that training, and we have a different focus every year, but we also model what we preach. So Catalyst is so different than any conference you've been to because really what we're getting into is the complex human dynamics of work.
Hmm.
And generally, like that's an area we stay away from in the professional space. But we think that that is how you engage with the public. It's how you build relations with the press. It's how you gain trust with elected officials and have them understand the better policies and solutions with water. And it's certainly how you build trust in tap water and wastewater services and get, customers who support and understand what you do. And so because of that, we're not in conference rooms. We don't like stare at PowerPoints. We really journey through a story. And I guess the one thing I want to say to people, anyone listening to that and thinking that that's too frou frou, is it's so research based. There's research and science
Yeah.
behind how we engage, how we remember things, and our environment and our surrounding. And so, we teach that research, but we also model it and use it. And so, this year, Catalyst is about the noisy media environment and how do we get our messages across when that's going on.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, the more important than ever, Isaac, because how many
Mm.
times have you heard me say to the company, it takes 7 times at
Yeah.
minimum for someone to retain a message. And in this noisy media environment, I would argue that that's probably double effort.
Hmm.
And when we're starting a baseline of we don't communicate at all,
Yeah.
right? Or we don't have the tools to know how to communicate. I feel like Catalyst and what Rogue's doing is really at mass scale, like really filling a void that exists in our industry right now. And so, I mean, kudos to you, Chelsea, and all that have come before to build up this discipline
Hmm.
right here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's fascinating too in some of our conversations on some other episodes with Kelly Deering Smith, just that aspect of learning the story of water, learning
Mm,
how to tell that to your community, learning how to involve the community into making it relevant to them. And so, not talking about, I think sometimes we can talk about water as a water industry versus water in my
in the
community, what
community.
that means. And so,
That's a great
making it
point.
small is how we make it engaging and how we get buy-in. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And how you localize it and make people care. People care about themselves. And people, I'm sorry, we think our message is the most important, but what's the most important to me every day is getting my son to school on time and making sure he's fed and then taking him to his doctor's appointments. Like that's the stressors in my mind. And that's also part of this noise. We say, or I say, a noisy media environment. The media is also just like what else I have going on and what my friends are texting me about, not
great
just
point.
necessarily the traditional news.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point
Yeah.
that we can't lose sight of.
Yeah, like what do you see as some of the blind spots when it comes to communication and public trust? What are some of the blind spots that we have in the industry to overcome?
Yeah, I honestly, I hate this answer because I think there's so many, right? And they're the normal ones we talk about. I'll say one thing I think is that as people, we think, and I don't think this is just to our industry, but as people, we think because we can talk, we can communicate. And that's not necessarily true. So if there's anything I continuously stress is there is strategy, there are experts, like this actually is a skill. Um, and then secondly, that we and especially leaders think, oh, these are soft skills. And it's one of my biggest pet peeves. So you'll hear me say over and over, they're actually some of the hardest things that we do. And I call them power tools, not
Yeah,
soft skills, because it's the power tools that make or break anything that we do. That it like I said, you can build your plan and you can implement, you know, better software to do all these things and all that's great and works. But if you don't know how to relay that, if you don't know how to make the consumers and the ratepayers understand why that was needed and how it's helping them, you really failed. And it can cause, big issues. And the city council is not going to vote for it because they have pressures. So really, these are power tools. So I think the biggest thing is we're not paying enough attention to invest in this. And then when we're actually implementing some of the engagement communication, I think the thing you'll hear a lot is jargon. And again, I do want to be clear, this is also not just us in the industry. There's actually this research, this theory and concept called the curse of knowledge. And it's scientists like figured it out and it says when we know what we know, we forget how much we know. And what that means is like we've spent years, right, studying and practicing whatever our skill set is. And so when that's water, when we get on the news or write a press release and we say the water main break, nobody in real life calls it a water main or a service line. It's a pipe. And we think in water like service line or water main are very simple terms, and
hmm
they're not. We
hmm
think watershed is a simple term, and it's not. And so we need to be even more clear than we are. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And then the last one that I'll say, even though I think there are so many more, is we get in this habit. And I did this when I started off in water. I thought it was the right thing to do, but we just kind of regurgitate facts. Isaac and I have had this conversation before when people complain about their water smell or water, how it visually looks. Where I live, the utility every once a year there was a late turnover event, which also the public doesn't understand what that means. That's a technical term. But the manganese in the water like turned it yellow for like a certain neighborhood for like 3 days. Happens every year. We have to message against that. And so I would tell people, hey, it's safe. It's a natural occurring mineral. Like, don't wash your clothes because it'll stain, but you can drink it. That's the craziest thing. Like, how insulting would I actually come to your face? Like, looking at you guys now, I'm laughing at myself. I would never look at you and say, drink this yellow water. Even though it's safe. So, yeah, I think we regurgitate facts instead of really get to human level and just be like, so for real, like no one's gonna drink that.
No one's gonna. I so appreciate that you brought that up because we in a former podcast had Bruno Pickett, who formerly of the EPA, and he actually was instrumental in revising the CCR among other things, obviously. But
Yeah.
and I think it's one of these things. It's not good enough to just take the template and the language off the shelf and ship it out. To your point, Chelsea, there has to be a translation
Hmm.
into human language like that resonates with people,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
think it's a good forcing function to say, hey, tell my water story.
Yeah.
But you just brought up the really important point. You got to do it in words that I can relate to. Otherwise, maybe we're still missing the mark, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if we only do the regurgitation and the translation,
Yeah.
we're not doing the work of making it relevant to our communities and localizing the impact of that.
Yeah.
That's the information that needs to be communicated. But what does that mean
Mm-hmm.
for me as a resident in my community?
Yeah. It's a great point.
And I think sometimes when we're having these conversations, and we do this at conferences too, right? We all agree we're so bad at comms. And I don't want it to be where the industry or the communicators or the general managers feel like we're beating up on them. I just want to get the point across that, like, hey, there is strategy and skill behind this. And so it is something we can improve on and we can learn, right? But we need to be going to trainings and practice and professional development to get better at this stuff. And there's strategy out there that we can learn to do better at it.
So
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
And I think, there's no shortage of challenges we could talk about to the water industry. And I even think about the challenges when we think about we need more folks in the workforce to meet the challenges of the water
Yeah.
industry. Um, and at the same time, we have to make sure that that's open, inclusive, and
Mhm.
welcoming. And you recently had a LinkedIn blog post that I just want to highlight that just talked about what it was to be a woman in water, and like what prompted that post and the response. Let's just talk about the response that it received.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate the question because I think this is a topic that, for whatever reason, it's taboo and we're scared to talk about it. And we're like, oh, we can't talk about it in professional settings, but it's happening to us in professional settings. And to your point, it's a workforce issue. And that's a huge issue that we need to solve in water. And this actually fits in. And so the post was a month ago and it was about just different levels of harassment and just BS, honestly, that women have to experience in our going about our professional day, whether that's at conferences, at work, or in this case, even online on LinkedIn. And so it really was I did it on a Saturday not as I was driving, but I saw this as I was driving to my nephew's like birthday party. And it was just the tipping point to me where I was so fed up where some man commented on some work post that I had on LinkedIn and said something like about my looks. And that's not the worst thing that's happened to me. It's certainly not the worst thing that's happened to a woman. But for me, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, even on LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm.
And what set me off about it is that it's the second, I don't know this guy. I literally couldn't even tell you his name right now, but I recognized it, like, I guess his profile picture in the comment because I'm like, didn't he do this a month ago? And he did. He commented it something like that a month ago too. And I guess what set me off is not just about him and then the one or two comments, but that had sat there for a month and no one called it out.
Mm-hmm.
No one said, like, this
Yeah.
guy's really saying that on her post. And so the reaction, the post, I just said, when is this going to stop? When do women not deal with this? I didn't really think much about it. Again, I was just fed up. And the response was overwhelming and disheartening, but also at the same time for me encouraging because it's been a month that's been seen 20,000 times. It's got 150 comments. It's been reposted almost 20 times. And to this day, like a month later, I literally got reactions and additional comments this morning. And what was even more is that the flood of women and their experiences that was coming in as a response, and many text messages, many direct messages where they wanted to tell their story and were afraid to say it publicly. Now, that didn't shock me initially. Like, I understand this is something, and a lot of women, you don't owe anyone the right to talk about that. But these were women in executive level positions. Like, I think some people are like, oh, I'm scared, like HR, the CEO, whatever. the caliber of women who were wanting to thank me and then anonymously share their story surprised me, and it fueled me even more of we've got to talk about this more and we've got to do something about it, and it's horrible. And if you don't mind, like just a few examples, personal examples, like people have hit on me at a conference, and then when sending me like a group picture later to my work cell, it include like a naked photo of them. That's literally happened at a
Yeah.
conference. I've had a friend who walked into her office on Valentine's Day with an anonymous package with inappropriate adult things in the package and notes, like really weird notes, right? Like these are things that shock people, but it doesn't shock me because every woman has a story. And this is happening everywhere. And I think it's time we start calling it out and we talk about it.
And I think, Chelsea, the other thing too is how do we make it not time? Because, I obviously this is near and dear to my heart, and bringing more women leaders into water in the workplace in general,
Yeah.
and not only bringing them into the workforce, but seeing them around the boardroom table. And I do think there's still very much a ceiling
Hmm.
for women, especially women in leadership. So, like Chelsea, how do we as women leaders in water otherwise, once we get women and get them to stay, because you're a tough cookie, I'm a tough cookie, we've found coping mechanisms to like let that stuff go so we can get on with our daily and what we know we're meant here and what we want to do.
Hmm.
Like what advice, or what do you see is how do we keep women entering the workforce and leading the workforce in a more meaningful way?
Yeah, I think one, thank you guys for agreeing to talk about this on a public platform. I
Hmm.
think that's huge. And I think that's huge. And I think it takes more of that. I think you're right. You and I, tough enough to deal with it, to do it, to move on, not let it phase us. Maybe we say a thing or two. Um, I want a day to exist where it's no, we don't have to have coping mechanisms. That's so sad. And we have had to have that. But in order to welcome other types of people who shouldn't have to have a thick skin in that way, shouldn't have to endure these comments and these inappropriate actions that are happening to us. Um, I I think a lot of different things. I think that openly talking about it, but doing more than like checking the box. I don't think sometimes, sexual harassment training. Okay, a lawyer did it and we checked the box. I've had a long conversation during one of them once, or actually I complained that there wasn't room for this conversation. But when it comes to reporting, like there are many reasons women don't report, and a lot of it is the stigma and the retaliation that happens later. And then people want to say, "Oh, we would never retaliate." Retaliation comes in many forms. It comes, I'm very outspoken about this. I've been very passionate about it for a long time, and I sometimes like don't get invited to certain receptions anymore. A dinner I won't get invited to because like, oh, Chelsea is the problem child because she called this out. Personally, great. Well, also,
Yeah.
I know other receptions I can go to. I know enough people, it's not affecting me. But what if I was, like, new to the industry and I got ostracized because I called out inappropriate behavior one time, and then all my opportunities to meet somebody were thwarted, and other people were getting those opportunities because they were okay to be around that behavior, or the behavior wasn't happening to them maybe because they were a man. Those are the kind of things we have to understand that this is affecting, right? And that is our career, and that is just our capacity to do our best every day when we're having to deal with all of this, and our brain, is having to go through how this feels and why we're so mad about it.
Kudos.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
some badass behavior right there.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. Well, and I also think that there's um we just have to realize that when we accept that behavior, we're limiting what we can actually accomplish, and that we're limiting what we're allowing to bring um, into the
Into the
industry,
workforce.
into the workforce,
Absolutely.
and our capacity to solve the problems that we face.
Definitely.
So yeah,
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good, and that's why I want, people like you, Isaac, and others to help talk about it and talk about what is the solution for it. I certainly don't have like the solution. Otherwise, I would be pitching it to everybody and it would be solved. But I think messaging in the way you did is important for certain people to hear that might not listen to me and what I'm saying about it. I
yeah,
Good
think
point.
the other thing when it comes to solutions, something that I just realized and I'm comfortable with now is that when you do things differently and you're speaking out, sometimes, people, not everyone's going to like that. And that I think we're going to have to go through some uncomfortable moments to get to a better world where, all these girls in STEM we're training to come work in our workforce, but aren't preparing that, hey, like this is probably going to happen to you though. To get to a better world where that's not the case, is going to have to go through some of these tough conversations and calling it out and, making that LinkedIn post. I got mostly positive, but I got some comments like, "Oh, are you sure you want to
Mhm.
do that?" I'm like,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
happening to me publicly. Like, why don't I want to do it? And I had one friend who reminded me, one of those friends who encourages you when things are going
Yeah.
on. She's like, Chelsea, if you're a trailblazer, what did you think? Like you were cutting away the sticks and branches for everybody and wasn't gonna get hit by them. Trailblazers go out
Yeah.
before everyone else and take the hit so that other people don't have to. And honestly, like in a weird way, that really encouraged me. And I think we need more trailblazers and change makers who are doing that. And it's going to suck and it's going to hurt. But I truly believe it's going to make everything better as well.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, and it is, I mean, not not to sound pithy, but it's like the title of the podcast is Making Water Work. And so like to make water work, we have to be willing to have those conversations. And I was talking
It
to
has
a
to.
friend recently about the difference between what it means to be a peacekeeper versus a peacemaker.
Hmm.
And the difference is, in my own definition, is like when you're willing to make peace, you're willing to lean into conflict, have the conversations because you
That's
want
right.
peace, not just maintaining and falling back. And so yeah, I really appreciate the courage that it took to do that and to start that conversation for the
Absolutely.
water industry internally. And then yeah, because we have to look inward, and especially because we also have uh roles to in our communities, and need to make progress in building trust, but we need to be able to build trust
Within our
within our
communities. Absolutely.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I think that's so beautifully poetic how you defined and analyze like peacekeeping versus peacemaking. Never thought about it before. I think you're so right. And I was gonna bring it right back to where you brought it is that I think it's no different in communities when we're about trust building, right? Building trust for our services. That actually takes going in and dealing with all the distrust and the hard conversations. And so it's not all kumbaya.
trust, transparency. We have to talk about things that we
Yes.
don't want to,
We don't,
or
yeah,
we would rather say, I don't want to have to communicate
right? Yeah,
this
right,
contaminant.
right. Is it like,
That
yeah,
what is contaminating our communities, not just the water, but also um, the things that make us our
Yeah.
community.
yeah, yeah. Learning to communicate the uncomfortable in
Mm-hmm.
a comfortable way,
Yeah.
right? Like that's kind of, it's
Yeah.
whether it's to your point, a contaminant, a water main break, or, a inclusive conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we're in this time where like the science isn't all figured out and we still have to talk during that time. And when misinformation is spreading, we certainly need to be talking during that time.
That's right.
So if anyone is listening to this and still thinks communication is soft and easy, please come like take my job because it's so hard.
Yeah. No, I have a lot of empathy, for you, Chelsea, and in that front, because especially when you don't have all the answers but have to communicate with certainty, that is an art,
Yeah.
right?
Uh,
That is an art,
Yeah.
and I think in water we have to do that a lot, especially in
Mm-hmm.
these times of uncertainty and what's going to happen and
Mm-hmm.
what's coming. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. As we kind of wrap up the conversation too, I'd love to know, like, what's one thing you'd encourage utilities to do today to start improving how they communicate with the public. This is so much of what you work on, as you put on Catalyst, and so yeah, I would love to kind of hear what your pointers would be to where should I start if I'm a utility looking to better communicate.
Yeah, I think one thing everyone can start doing, and I think there are levels to it where they could even go deeper and get better. But a easy way to start is think about the a lot of times we say we're talking to the general public. There is no general public. So really think about your actual audience, who you're actually
That's
talking
good.
to, And when you do think about this, it is a natural thing. Like, obviously, if I'm talking to my son, he has different motivators than if I'm talking to the mayor, who has different motivators than I'm talking to the customer in the wealthy part of town. If I'm talking to the customer who can hardly pay their bills every month, all right? Those are all different audiences. I need to tailor my messages accordingly. So if you sit back and kind of just do your own kind of audience analysis, this is really called audience personas, and there's a whole process that Rogue can help you with and other people can help you with in breaking that down and what it looks like. But doing it a little bit yourself as best as you can of who are the different kinds of audiences that you're communicating to on a daily basis, and thinking about how you would say that differently or what they care about. Again, when you're talking to the mayor versus you're talking to your customers, care about two very different things. So you're changing your messaging, you're changing your point. I think that's something that's such a good start that honestly, so many utilities don't do. They have one message for everyone for everything.
Yeah,
So good.
I love it. Speaking our language, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And where can our listeners go to learn more about Catalyst, Rogue Water, connect with you?
Yeah, so roguewaterlab.org, super easy, right? A lot of stuff on there. LinkedIn obviously is my, I don't know what to say obviously, but if you know me, obviously is my favorite platform. So you can find me, Chelsea Boozer, on there, also Rogue Water Lab, and just a lot of our stuff is posted. Rogue has all the other traditional social media accounts as well.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for joining us on this episode. This was such an important conversation for us to have, and such a good conversation to keep going. And we can't wait to see you on the road.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for jumping into something taboo, but that is happening in water every day. And really excited for this new platform you guys built in saying, not how people are making water work, but hopefully this is inspiring better solutions to keep making water work. So yeah, thank you guys again for having me. Really appreciate it.
Oh,
Thank
absolutely,
you.
Chelsea. Keep making change.
What an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for joining this week's episode. It was so good to have this conversation with Chelsea. Megan, just really what stood out to you in this conversation?
I mean, Chelsea's really brave. I think it takes a lot of guts, to what she posted on LinkedIn, but also she obviously has personal passion and wants to do and be part of the solution. And that takes a lot of guts. And so for me, what stood out is, she's the epitome of a change maker that we want to have on this podcast and helping make water work for everyone. And how do we figure it out and build an inclusive community so that we can actually realize that goal, And
Yeah.
she's really living that. Her actions are really living up to that. That's what stood out to me.
Yeah. And I really love how she turns it around and flips it on its head, that communications is a soft skill, but it's a power tool. And it's something that is really important and critical to the work, to making water work. It's not just doing the work, it's also communicating about the work. And she just articulates that so well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this week for this episode of Make Water Work. We're so excited that you're part of this conversation and community. And please like, share, follow, and please drop us a comment. Who else can we interview that makes water work? And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Make Water Work podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message. Together, we can make water work for everyone.